that such a judicial inquiry or
had
an
to
inquiry
be done just now.
Yep. And you could understand why they want out of town, or police who aren't and judiciary and investigators who aren't local, wanting them to run the investigation so that there's no personal interest in obscuring the facts and the evidence, provided they can get it still.
So this is a hell of a case. Like I said, it was the 20th anniversary of Natalia's murder. So surprisingly enough, I didn't know about this case until I knew about the anniversary. And I say surprisingly because the number of female that are murdered in Argentina every year because of gender violence it's so high. So I like, so to speak, I'm interested in this case because we can see that for one side we have violence against women because Natalia was a girl and she was kidnapped to be sexually abused by these men, and she was murdered to cover that crime. Basically, that is what we assume why she was murdered. And on the other side, we have institutional violence. That is because the perpetrators of the crime were part of the police forces, which are allegedly there to protect the citizens and not murder us.
Absolutely, and hold positions of power in the community. And, as you said, institutional violence inflicts across the power divide.
The statistics of police violence in Argentina are also particularly high. There are some other cases of police violence that I would like to talk a bit more in some other occasion. And we could do some of Australia because I'm sure Australian police has some dirty clothes hanging around.
Absolutely. Just you have to look at the case of the Luna Park fun fair ghost train fire just to look at police corruption and murder, and it's
we're so going to do an episode of that.
Yeah, maybe coming up. But in the wake of such a horrific crime, it did bring a spotlight on institutional violence, particularly against women, and also acts of femicide, which at the time wasn't considered to be a separate crime.
We're talking about the case of Natalia.
Yes.
Because I was telling Chris that in Argentina we have the legal figure of femicide, that is the murder of a woman because of her woman condition. So we could say that it's a crime.
Essentially a hate crime.
A hate crime.
Against women.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And there are just very few countries that had that figure because adding feminicide to the legal system in Argentina was something that was carried on by the feminist movement. Nowadays, in an interview, Laura Calampuca, the mother of Natalia, would say that if Natalia had been murdered nowadays, it would have been a feminicide.
And it would have also attracted a higher sentencing rate as well. I believe at the time, the maximum, which I think some of the police got, was 25 years.
It was Gustavo Fernandez, the one that got 25 years, but the cops got a life sentence. But there were 3 charges in this case.
But the rather than homicide, femicide has a maximum sentence of 35 years rather than 25.
Some people argue about what importance of how essential feminism is for this work. I'm just going to talk about numbers because sometimes it's easier to understand the severity of a situation with numbers. Let's remember that each number of this statistic
is a human being.
It's a human being. So from the 1st of January to the 31st of March of 2021, 65 femicides had happened in Argentina. That is, 65 women have been murdered. Of that of the perpetrators, 63% were partners or ex-partners of the victim. And of that number, 17% of the perpetrators were part of the police force or the army.
So the cross-section, the intersection of institutional figures committing femicide is alarmingly high.
Yeah.
So even though a lot of steps have been made and the death of Natalia did galvanize a lot of different sections of society, particularly in the city of
Miramar.
Mm-hmm. And Natalia's mother, Laura, is still living in the city and still organizing and acting as a public figure to speak out against institutional and acts of femicide and gender-focused violence. It's one good thing you could say that has come out is that there is the solidarity by this particular city, but by citizens everywhere across Argentina, that even though it's still high and there still is problems with institutional complicity and covering up or ignoring acts of violence against women, that it's being spoken about publicly, and that people are aware that it is a severe issue, and however, it's one that is not going away, and people are clearly sick of it.
And people around the world should know it as well, because I think we know a lot about the police brutality that happens in that States, particularly against the African American and people of color communities. But the police violence in not only Argentina and Latin America, it is quite high, as well as the gender violence.
Yes. Thank you for listening to our commentary and our dive into the murder, rape, torture of Natalia Melman. Next time we
promise that we will be more constant on our recordings.
Yes. Hopefully I won't be waylaid again. And again, I would love to thank the wonderful Steph Animal for providing the intro and outro music.
Yes.
One of our local musical gems. And thank you, Steph. We love you lots.
We would like to add a small disclaimer about our last episode about the killer couple David and Catherine Berney. While we were talking about David Berney's childhood, we also include some testimonies that said that he was a sex addict and into fetish sex. So we didn't say that in that episode, so we're going to say this now. We're not doing any sort of kink shaming. What we meant to say is in that episode is that we were trying to describe the characteristics of the sex life and fantasies of David Berney, which at the end turned out to be closely related to the motivation behind the abductions and murder that he performed with his partner, Catherine. So then again, that a person likes or is into kinky or fetish sex doesn't mean that they are rapists or that they are abusers. A person can have such sort of fantasies and indulge in them in a healthy way. The thing is that David Berney wasn't just only the fictional stuff. He wanted to perform real rapes. We thought that it was important that we should make this point very clear.
Thanks again for listening. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, you can find us on social media. Our Instagram is A History of Evil Men. That's all in one word, so just search for that. Our Facebook is A History of Evil Men, a true crime podcast. And if you'd like to email us, our address is ahistoryofelmen@gmail.com. No spaces in that, that's all one word. And if you'd like to support us, our Patreon is A History of Evil Men. Same as before, all one word. Thanks again for listening.